When you think most important video games, you'll often come up with these answers: Super Mario Bros., Tetris, Wii Sports, Minecraft. But one of the most common answers to that question will doubtless be Pokémon Red and Pokémon Blue. The games were massively popular around the late 90s. I wasn't there for it, but I sure as heck heard the stories. They went on to sell over 30 million units and would start what would soon become the highest grossing media franchise ever. These games saw many re-releases throughout their lifetime, so please bear with me for a bit. First off, for Pokémon Red and Green, developed by Japanese video game company Game Freak and licensed by Nintendo, who had previously allowed Game Freak to borrow their IPs to let them create games such as Yoshi on the NES, as well as Mario and Wario on the SNES. It's great classics right there. Red and Green were released on the original Game Boy in Japan back on February 27th, 1996. Pokémon Red and Green were largely the same game, with their only difference being a few version-exclusive Pokémon. For example, in Pokémon Red, you could find an Oddish at Route 5, but if you are playing Pokémon Green, you would instead find a Bellsprout. The games would later go on to receive an enhanced re-release titled Pokémon Blue, which featured updated sprites, bug fixes, as well as choosing select Pokémon from Red and Green to be catchable. Weirdly enough, it was originally available exclusively for subscribers of Japanese magazine CoroCoro Comics on October 15th, 1996. But it would later get a Japanese retail release on October 10th, 1999. By that point, however, Pokémon Red and Blue are already released over at the West on September 28, 1998. We never got Green version outside of Japan. I'm not sure why. I guess they just thought Blue was cooler, but still a weird marketing thing. Anyways, both the Western Red and Blue are based on the Japanese Blue version, but the Western Blue version featured the same version exclusives as the Japanese Green version, adding even more to the confusion. And finally, we got Pokémon Yellow, released in Japan on September 12th, 1998, and North America on October 18th, 1999. Yellow was largely inspired by the popular Pokémon anime that was airing around the time, and still to this day. It featured even further updated sprites, brand new PokéDex entries, along with a few new characters and gameplay elements. And those are all of the original versions of Pokémon Red and Blue, and that's not even counting the remakes, which will be covered separately later down the road. I deliberated for a while on which version I would mainly cover for this video, but in the end I settled on Pokémon Yellow, mostly just for it being visually the best version. But Yellow sadly also has its downsides compared to Red and Blue, which I'll mention throughout the video. Personally, I always held a bit of a grudge towards this first generation, mostly due to the annoying people saying that they are the best Pokémon games and that the rest of the series sucks, aka Gen 1ers. Along with Game Freak absolutely pandering to those people during some of the series' later years. Of course, if you genuinely think that the first generation is the best and the rest of the series sucks, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You're completely entitled to your own opinion. But Gen 1 fans often had pretty hypocritical takes, along with them just clearly not caring for the newer games enough at all to fairly judge them. Luckily, Gen 1ers have substantially quieted down over the years, as they were mostly just a thing during the late 2000s and early 2010s, but their presence sadly still lingers on to this day. However, I will not take any of these gripes into account when looking at the games, as it would be silly of me to judge a product purely by its legacy. Everything I'll be looking at today is going to be with as little hindsight as possible. I'll just be analyzing these games without drawing any comparisons from the later titles, and with as little bias as I could possibly afford. And also, I feel as if this goes without saying, but full spoilers for Red, Blue and Yellow will be present. So if you don't want to get spoiled on a 25-year-old game, feel free to come back after you finish the games yourselves. I plan to go as in-depth as possible with these games, so relax. Maybe do something while putting this video in the background, and let us begin our Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow journey. Pokémon's premise is one that honestly sells itself. It takes place in a world very similar to our own in terms of appearance, containing the Kanto region, which is based on the real-life Japan's Kanto, supporting a late 90s aesthetic, with bustling cityscapes and advanced devices. However, where this world differs from our own is with its signature Pokémon. There are 150 known Pokémon species in the Kanto region. These creatures often support appearances and demeanors very similar to real-life animals and objects, as well as whatever the fuck Magmar is supposed to be. They all also support up to 2 of 15 different types. Set types range from elemental affinities such as water and poison, to more physical attributes such as bug and fighting. These Pokémon can use various different skills, each corresponding to different types, ranging from offensive to supportive maneuvers. Each type has its pros and cons, so some Pokémon will naturally be weaker than some others. Thanks to many technological advancements, the people of the Pokémon world were able to invent the Pokéball, a ball-shaped item that can convert any Pokémon into digital data, and allow people to easily take them anywhere with ease. This may kinda sound like animal abuse, but the game makes it clear that most Pokémon love being with humans and in Pokéballs, so it isn't presented as a problem from their perspective, Peter. Nowadays, Pokémon and humans have grown closer than ever. For many people, Pokémon are pets, supporters and such. And as for Professor Oak, the man with the sprite that makes him look like a zombie, he's a Pokémon researcher who appears fascinated by Pokémon, and wants to learn all he could about them. However, what is by far the most popular Pokémon related activity, and heck, activity in general, is Pokémon battling. Many people known as Pokémon trainers use their Pokémon to do battle with other people's Pokémon. Pokémon battles are essentially treated as a form of sport in the Kanto region. If you are the best Pokémon trainer, you're basically considered the very best, like no one ever was! In order to become a Pokémon champion, trainers are tasked with traveling around the region, and defeating 8 gym leaders all specializing in different types. After defeating a gym leader, trainers will be rewarded with badges, which, along with increasing their Pokémon's capabilities, will allow them to challenge the Pokémon League when all 8 are required, where they'll have to defeat the Elite Four, the 4 strongest trainers in all of Kanto. If they could somehow achieve such a task, they will be awarded the title of Pokémon Champion, and so, we are put in control of a soon-to-be brand new up-and-coming Pokémon trainer, an 11-year-old officially known as simply Red. However, you can name him whatever you want to. He is clearly supposed to serve the role of a self-insert, with him being a blank slate silent protagonist, and with Pokémon having many multiplayer elements, it is definitely encouraged to give him your own name. However, for this playthrough, I decided to stick with the canon name. I just generally feel more comfortable with it, and it's not like I plan to partake in much multiplayer activity anyway. We also get to name Professor Oak's grandson, who has been Red's longtime rival, officially known as Blue Oak. Or Green Oak as he's called in Japan. I mean, an oak is green. Just like with Red, the game lets you give Blue any name you want. Which is a bit odd, as Blue already has a pre-established character, but this was likely done so that people could put their real-life friends or enemies in Blue's shoes. That, also that you could give him stupid names to feel good about yourself. That's right, take that, Shrek! I am the Pokémon All-Star! Of course though, I went with the default name, cause I'm a lame normie. But with the introductions out of the way, it's time to begin our adventure. Pokémon is a JRPG, and it doesn't do as much as you'd likely think it would to deviate from the genre. The Pokémon you catch act as your party members, and you could only have up to 6 Pokémon on hand at once, and said Pokémon can only have up to 4 moves, which can be learned by either leveling up or using a TM/HM. The moves you can learn vary greatly in use, but you can't spam them forever, as every move has a limited amount of power points, or PP, that can be used. Once a move runs out of PP, it can't be used anymore, and the only way to get your PP back is by either using the rare Ether and Elixir items, or healing your Pokémon at a Poké Center. Most of the time, the stronger the move, the less max PP it'll have. There are also 5 status conditions you should watch out for, those being Burn, Sleep, Paralysis, Poison, and Freeze. Each of these will weaken your Pokémon, so you want to avoid them at all costs. Pokémon battles are entirely 1 versus 1, meaning all of your party members act independently. Switching out your Pokémon will cost you a turn, and will leave the Pokémon who just entered the battlefield vulnerable for an attack. However, if your active Pokémon faints, you'll be able to get your next Pokémon in without wasting a turn. Believe it or not, the game actually gives you an advantage when battling the AI. After you take down one of their Pokémon, the game will tell you what Pokémon they're going to send out next. and let you swap out your own Pokémon for free, which the AI obviously cannot do. You could pretty easily argue that this is pretty cheap and unfair, and I mean, it is. But that's where the option menu comes in to save the day. Going into the battle style option, the game will let you toggle between two modes, Shift and Set. Shift will give you the advantage I mentioned earlier, but Set will actually remove the handicap and won't allow you to swap out your Pokémon for free after knocking out the opponents. Before this playthrough, I used to always play on Shift, simply because I knew it was easier and I was more used to it. But for this new playthrough, I actually chose to play on Set, and I'm pretty happy I did, as playing on Set definitely helped make the game more refreshing, as well as more technically fair. I'm probably going to play on Set for the rest of my Pokemon playthroughs from now on. This options menu in general is awesome, letting you speed or slow down the text speed, as well as turn off battle animations if you want the fights to go by faster, much approved. While the battle system itself is pretty simple, the appeal of Pokemon's combat, for me at least, comes more so from the team building aspect. There are 151 Pokemon in these original games, and thus 151 different potential party members. With how many different possible party matchups are on offer here, 2 playthroughs of Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow will have an extremely small chance of being the same. Everyone's Pokémon experience is different. One part I struggled with may have been a cakewalk for someone else, and vice versa. The team building aspect is what makes Pokémon so unique to me. Every single opponent you face has a team of Pokémon you can use. You're just seeing their setups. If you battle a boss and he has a cool team you might wanna use, you can do that. You can basically imitate any boss opponent in the entire game. Just how cool is that? Even if the battles are purely one-on-one, JRPGs with bigger party setups usually don't allow for this insane amount of customization. It's what makes the bond the game tries to build up between you and your Pokémon work for me. You chose to use these Pokémon. They accompanied you through your whole journey. They grow in power along with you growing in skill. I know that this is me just talking about a bunch of numbers, but the illusion still works for me. These aren't just 6 random Magikarp, they are my 6 random Magikarp. Pokémon is one of those rare games that is able to put a smile on my face, and that is pretty fucking commendable. My first party member was of course Pikachu. In Pokémon Red and Blue, the game gives you 3 starter options: the Grass-type Pokémon Bulbasaur, the Fire-type Pokémon Charmander, and the Water-type Pokémon Squirtle. All 3 support great designs that are cute while also having a bit of fierceness in them. They also have very clean color palettes that clearly correspond to their types. The trio works as an elemental circle: grass beats water, water beats fire, and fire beats grass. Think of it as a cooler version of rock, paper, scissors. Though I did always find it weird that while Charmander and Squirtle were purely fire and water types respectively, Bulbasaur is actually both grass type as well as poison type. Poison is mostly used as a secondary type for most Pokemon, and all but 3 grass-type Pokemon in the entire game are also Poison-type. But I personally think it would have made more sense to give Bulbasaur his Poison typing later on, as to not make him stand out among the trio. My personal favorite was always Charmander. I'm not sure why, there was always something about his design that really appealed to me. It's just so damn cute! Maybe it's because of how precious his cry in the anime is. I'm not sure. Of course, all 3 of these Pokemon will eventually level up, and with that, evolve and get stronger. When a Pokemon evolves, their designs change, their base stats get boosted, and they might even receive an additional type. In the case of Charmander, he ends up becoming the fearsome beast that is Charizard, gaining the flying type. While I do like Charizard, I personally believe it does lose a bit of the charm Charmander had, or should I say, Charmander. Okay, I'm so sorry. I think Squirtle's final evolution, Blastoise, does a far better job at maintaining Squirtle's charm, while still being cool and cute in its own right. Yeah, I think Blastoise is cute, what of it? And I honestly never really cared much for the Bulbasaur line, to be honest. All solid designs, just not my cup of tea. Despite me liking Charmander, he is sadly the absolute worst choice in my opinion, as the first 2 gyms are rock and water type respectively, which are both strong against fire. You will more than likely get wrecked by Brock, the first gym leader, and have to either grind or catch a new Pokemon in order to defeat him. Now surprisingly enough, people often claim that this is a positive, as it basically makes Charmander the hard mode option, whereas Bulbasaur is the easy mode, as he is actually strong against the first two gyms, and has resistance to the following two. But the issue with this mindset is that new players will have no idea that picking Charmander will land them such a tough time at the early game. Fire type in Gen 1 just kinda sucks in general, being weak against ground, rock and water, three of the most common types in the game, and there aren't any noteworthy types that are weak to fire. It's strong against ice, but not only are ice types rare, but most of them are also water type, which resists fire, meaning that they just take neutral damage to fire attacks, and can more than likely take them out rather quickly. And therein lies an issue with Pokémon Yellow. Since you start out with a Pikachu, whose electric attacks have no effect whatsoever against Brock's ground-type Pokémon, you are forced into the same Charmander situation, where you will more than likely have to either grind or level up a Pokémon who knows a fighting-type attack, such as Mankey or Nidoran. Despite me only having Pikachu as my primary party member at the time, I still somehow managed to beat Brock's Onix on my first try. There were two things that helped me pull this off. First off are all of the potions I collected along the way. I was able to just spam them at Pikachu in order to stay alive for long enough to defeat Brock's Geodude. And as for his deadly Onix, I actually used some Pokemon I just caught for reserve, those being Caterpie, Metapod, and Pidgey, in order to slowly inflict the Onix with a bunch of status lowering attacks, which then allowed Pikachu to just barely take it out. You see, while type matchups are greatly important for sure, it would be flat out wrong to say that they mean everything. A skillful trainer with a type disadvantage will more than likely beat an on-skill trainer with a type advantage. Many people like to undermine Pokemon's battle system as just a rock paper scissors card game, with your Pokemon being your cards, but that is just not how Pokemon should be approached at all. Unless you're playing the actual Pokemon card game. Wouldn't really know though, never understood that one. I used to undermine status moves such as Swords Dance and Toxic, but nowadays I greatly appreciate them. And my battle with Brock is one I believe is a good example as to why. However, I still believe that starting off with Pikachu is a pretty bad way to introduce someone into Pokemon. Put it simply, if the whole game was made with you starting off with a Pikachu in mind, then it wouldn't have had its first gym use exclusively ground-type Pokémon. That basically encapsulates the main issue with Pokémon Yellow. It makes changes to Red and Blue without really considering how they affect the final product, and leaves it feeling way too rushed and poorly thought out. You can clearly see this with the opening scene that occurs before you get your first Pokémon. Professor Oak finds a Pikachu on Route 1, despite the fact that Pikachu can't be found on Route 1 in any version of these games. And then Oak just chucks a Pokeball he conveniently happened to have at this random Pikachu, and catches it on his first try, which, by the way, only has a 28.707% chance of success. Possible for sure, but I personally feel like Professor Oak, being the great professor that he is, would know that he is better off running away, rather than just throwing his one Pokeball at it in a vain attempt he might capture this Pikachu. Little stuff like that plague most of the changes made in Yellow, and it is the main reason why I can't say that it's the definitive version of the Gen 1 games. I named my Pikachu Boogaloop, deriving from the iconic subtitle of the 1984 film, Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. Pikachu is an electric type, so I thought Boogaloop would make a decent amount of sense. The P at the end is really just there to round out the name. I am fully aware that my Pokemon nicknames are far from great at all, but I think my work during this playthrough was at the very least serviceable. You are luckily not forced to use this Pikachu, but I did decide to use him anyways, mostly for the few extra scenes he unlocks, as well as something I'll save for later on. This Pikachu is actually pretty unique. It has its cry from the anime, which sounds like it was compressed about 50 times so that it could fit on a Game Boy cartridge. You see, while the games give each Pokemon their own unique low-quality animal sounds, some of which are just reused with different pitches and speeds, the anime has most Pokemon say out their names for their cries. While this does sound extremely stupid on paper, like, imagine if real-life animals did that shit, in practice it is actually extremely cute most of the time, so props to the anime for that I guess. But back to good old Pikachu. He also follows you around in the overworld, and has an affinity system, where depending on your actions, he'll grow closer or further away from you. It doesn't affect the gameplay at all, only really changing his reaction to you talking to him, as well as determining whether this lady in Celadon City will give you a Bulbasaur or not, because reasons. But still, An affinity system with your Pokemon is definitely neat. Even if I do think it would have been pretty cool if maybe Pikachu got stronger as he grows closer to you or something. And I do love just how derpy he looks when following you. His face is all smooshed together and he looks about as big as Red in the overworld, which just makes it seem like you have a guy wearing a Pikachu mascot suit following you around, which cracks me up for some reason. As you have no doubt noticed, the visuals are far from what you would call graceful. As I said earlier, the games were released on the Game Boy in 1996. By that time, the system was already 7 years old, and was starting to show its age for sure. While Pokemon undoubtedly helped it with staying alive during its final years, it was also sadly held back by it. The battle sprites do look very solid, but that's mostly thanks to Pokemon Yellow having the third sprite revisions for these Pokemon, as the original Japanese version, and even the updated Blue version, had some ugly ass sprite work. Yellow's battle sprites stay closer to the Pokemon anime, and has the designs that are still used to this day. You could tell that many of the original sprites could easily be inferred in many different ways, and that's the main reason so many Gen 1 Pokemon have so many revisions. This is a huge pro for Yellow in my opinion. Pidgey is always my go-to example. Just look at how derpy and low detailed these original sprites were, and then compare them to the beautiful Yellow sprite work. I can definitely see why many would prefer the original sprites, as they definitely do have quite a bit of charm. But for my money, I take Yellow's Pokemon sprite work any day. I wish I could say the same for the overworld sprites however. Unlike the battle sprites, these have been barely updated in any of the versions, and it shows. The thing that gets me is mainly the faces. Everyone just has dots for eyes and open mouths, making it seem like they're all just in a perpetual state of shock. Most of the important characters have unique sprites, but NPCs tend to reuse sprites a lot, especially this guy. Get used to seeing him all over the place. While the game gets enhanced by the Super Game Boy, it sadly is still held back by the original that the games were made for. The Game Boy could display 4 colors at a time. When played on a Super Game Boy, moving into different locations of the overworld will change the color palette for a more appropriate color. While I take this over black and white any day, it does sadly make the locations feel less connected, as every time you move into a new location, the game has to briefly stop and load the new color palette in, which isn't an issue with the stationary color palette. The battles however locally get around this. From my understanding, the game splits the battle screen into 4 different sections, and then applies different color palettes to each of them depending on the Pokemon. While this does mean that Pokemon sprites are limited to only 4 colors, it does still work in adding life into these confrontations. While playing Yellow on a Game Boy Color does yield the same results as a Super Game Boy, the same sadly can't be said about Red and Blue. When played on a Game Boy Color, Red and Blue take on their corresponding color schemes, meaning Red is mostly red, and Blue is mostly blue. While this is nice in the sense that it differentiates the versions, and gives you what is likely your preferred color of the two, it does also look very off at many points, especially with Red having its demonic bloody water. Pokémon Red version on the Game Boy Color might as well be Pokémon Hell version at this rate, my god. I do have one final issue about the game's Super Game Boy Color palette however, and it mostly has to do with the way I chose to play it. I played through the entirety of Pokémon Yellow on an emulator, which means I got crystal clear sprites and colors. This is personally how I like playing all 2D games, but the issue with that is that these games were never meant to be seen with such clarity. The original Game Boy Color screen has pretty poor lighting, which is why many of its games featured extremely bright color palettes. A purely white battle background might be fine in a damp display, but when using a bright 1080p monitor, it can seriously hurt the eyes. Every single color is as primary as can be. I wanted on multiple occasions to turn my screen brightness down. I didn't do it of course, because I worried it might mess up the footage. So I endured the pain for the sake of the footage, and I'm pretty sure my eyesight has gone down by at least 2 points with the making of this video. I really sacrificed myself for these. After sticking with Pikachu for a while, I finally caught my second party member at Route 5, said party member being the psychic type Abra. Now Abra is quite interesting, as he is quite possibly one of the absolute worst Pokemon in the entire game, only being able to learn teleport via level up, a move that allows him to instantly run away without fail. This makes catching Abra a bit of a hassle, as if you don't have access to status inflicting moves, you'll have to throw a Pokeball at it while it is at full health and hope to catch it. This now begs the question, why would I possibly want to use this Pokemon? Well, after a bit of training, when Abra reaches level 16, he evolves into Kadabra, An absolutely brutal Pokémon with insane special stats. This isn't the only Pokémon to do something like this. Magikarp, a Pokémon even more useless than Abra, only being able to use Splash for the longest time, a move that does absolutely nothing, evolves into Gyarados at level 20, one of the strongest Water-type Pokémon in the entire game. This is one of my favorite uses of the evolution system, tasking players with sticking with the useless party member for a while, with the trade-off being the Pokémon getting much stronger after reaching a certain level. It's a great payoff for hard work. However, Kadabra isn't this Pokémon's final form, and I'm not a big fan of the means of acquiring said final form. You see, Kadabra has one of Gen 1's 4 trade evolutions. But before I can get into that, I need to talk about trading. Arguably the main thing to set Pokémon apart from other JRPGs at the time or its multiplayer aspects. By connecting two Game Boys together using a link cable, you would get access to a variety of two-player activities, and by a variety, I mean two. In my opinion, this is the main thing that helped Pokémon get as big as it got. People often credit Final Fantasy VII for being the game to popularize JRPGs in the West. But I personally believe Pokémon, which came out only a year after FF7 in North America, also had a big part in that. Not trying to undermine FF7's importance, but Pokémon's addition of multiplayer was what made it more than a JRPG for so many people. It was a social device. You were able to trade and battle anyone's Pokémon, while battling was undeniably really cool, and started up the now flourishing competitive Pokémon scene, where a bunch of nerds throw out Garchomps, Landorus, and Pachirisus like nobody's business. It was the trading aspect that really took off. For one, if you tried using a Pokémon and didn't like it, you could trade them with someone else's Pokémon they might not like, but you would like. You might think this could potentially break the game, as you could technically have someone trade a bunch of level 100 Pokémon to you as soon as trading becomes available, but the game cleverly circumvents this, by not letting you have full control over high level traded Pokémon. Unless you have the right badges, they will often just not obey to you, which makes the game not fun. But the side quest of filling out the Pokédex and catching every single Pokémon Kanto had to offer, at the time, was incredibly enticing. Everything in the games encouraged you to accomplish this, and that's where the version exclusive Pokémon come in. It was impossible to complete the Pokédex with just one game. You had to have had a friend who owned the opposing version, you didn't. This made completing the Pokédex a community effort. It was about people helping each other out and growing closer as a result. Yeah, the trading process was slow and junk as all hell, requiring you to reset your game after finishing with it for some reason, but that still didn't take away from the pure magic of Pokémon's trading. At least, I think it was magic. You see, there is something about me I think I have to make clear when it comes to Pokémon. I have no friends. Who would want to play a stupid baby game like Pokémon with a socially awkward loser who didn't even play Clash of Clans? God damn, that shit came out 9 years ago, I'm old. My time in middle school was rough. Everyone was just obsessed with crappy mobile games, and I, as a result, didn't even bother with them. I already went through enough bullying in elementary school, and I didn't see middle school being much different. I was a proud loner, and to some extent still am a proud loner to this day. Please follow me on Twitter, it validates my existence. Do you know the nerds people like to parody, who just own multiple systems and traded Pokémon with themselves? Well, yeah, that's me. And when you have no friends, completing the Pokédex becomes much more of a numbers game, as you have to scour the web to see what are the most efficient ways to catch and evolve Pokémon are. Case in point, Kadabra. Kadabra will evolve into Alakazam after being traded. The game does hint at that fact, so I won't fault it for being cryptic. But in the end of the day, if you don't have any friends, trade evolutions are basically just content locked behind paywalls. If you want this Pokémon, you have to buy another system, a link cable, and another copy of one of the games. And as a person who doesn't have any friends, I am personally not a fan. Why do these Pokémon even evolve after being traded? Do they really just hate you that much? The game sure does never give an explanation. I am fine with version exclusives, as I can at least see what their purpose is. But I don't think Pokémon would have suffered much if they just removed trade evolutions entirely. and just had Pokemon like Kadabra and Graveler simply evolve by level up. I named my Alakazam Edward, because he holds spoons, and Edward from Final Fantasy IV is a spoony bard. There's your deep Exellock lore. Alakazam is one of the most overpowered Pokemon in the entire game, and that is mostly due to the fact that in Gen 1, Psychic types are completely busted. This is due to a number of things. First off, the special stat. In Gen 1, Pokemon have 5 stats: HP, Attack, Defense, Speed, and Special. Most of them act as you would expect. HP is the amount of maximum hit points you have, Attack is your damage output for physical attacks, Defense is your resistance to physical attacks, and Speed determines who goes first. But then we have the problem child, Special. In Gen 1, Special has 2 purposes. It determines both the damage output of your special attacks, as well as your resistance to said special attacks. Meaning that if a Pokemon could dish out massive amounts of special damage, they could also sponge massive amounts of special damage. Whether an attack is physical or special is determined purely by its type. This means that moves such as Hyper Beam are physical, while Fire Punch and Vine Whip are special. This gives special types such as Water and Electric an inherent advantage over physical types such as Rock and Poison, as they can specialize in 2 attributes for the price of only 1 stat. And this is where the Psychic type comes in. Psychic inherently only has 1 weakness, Bug. It was also supposed to be weak to Ghost, but due to a glitch it actually completely resists Ghost. What do you know? But it being weak to Bug doesn't really mean much when Bug is by far the worst type in the entire game. There are only 3 damage dealing Bug type moves, and guess what? They all suck. The only one that's almost kinda useful is Pin Missile, but there are only 2 Pokemon who can learn Pin Missile, those being Beedrill and Jolteon. Beedrill is part Poison type, which is weak to Psychic, and can be outsped by almost any Psychic type Pokemon in the game, who will most definitely one-shot it. And Jolteon, while being a good Pokemon, is an Electric type. You see, while Pokemon can often learn moves that are not of their types, you should take same type attack bonus into account when thinking up movesets, or STAB for short. Damn, STAB, what a cool acronym. You see, when a Pokemon uses an attacking move of their type, the moveset's power is increased by 1.5 times, which encourages Pokemon to have at least 1 strong move of their type. And that, combined with the fact that Bug type is physical, and Jolteon is primarily special oriented, makes Spin Missile not very desirable on a Jolteon. And don't even get me started on the Psychic type's offensive properties. There is only 1 type in the entire game that resists Psychic. None of them are immune to it. And would you like to guess just which type has the privilege of resisting and being able to go up against Psychic? Well, of course it's the Psychic type. The only Pokemon resistant to Psychic attacks are Psychic types, meaning that the best, most reliable type to beat up against Psychic types is Psychic type. Jesus, how many times am I gonna say Psychic? In short, Psychic types break almost any form of balance Gen 1 could have possibly had. You could literally just use a team of 6 Alakazams, and you'll absolutely steamroll through the entire game. I am not even kidding. Now you might be curious as to where all of this data comes from. Well, definitely not the games, that's for sure. As Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow completely lack any sort of item and move descriptions, the NPCs usually do a good job with explaining how basic game mechanics and items work. But let's say your Pokémon wants to learn a new move, but all 4 of your move slots are already filled up with useful attacks. There is absolutely no way to know what the new move does at all. All the game will give you is the move's name, so if it sounds pretty cool you might want to delete it in place of something else. But the issue is that once you overwrite a move, it's gone for good, and the same goes for choosing not to learn new moves that come your way. Oh, and as a side note, when you plan to learn a new move instead of an older one, it is way too easy to mash through the text and accidentally delete the move on your first slot. Probably set Pokemon's best move for good, as the game doesn't give you any chance to regret deleting it. This luckily didn't happen for me in this playthrough, but it definitely did in previous ones. Because the game never tells you any specifics of moves such as power and accuracy, Red, blue and yellow are practically unplayable nowadays without any form of outside help. And for my money, I would take Bulbapedia any day. An incredibly useful and informative site that has almost everything you need to know about Pokemon. Using Bulbapedia is honestly the way I like playing Pokemon games in the first place. I prefer planning my team ahead of time, and knowing exactly where the Pokemon I want can be found. Some people will doubtless argue that using a website in order to enjoy a game is unethical to the original intended experience. But to that I say, let people enjoy games however they want to. Are people playing Pokemon using walkthroughs really hurting your mental state? You could also argue that not everyone has access to the internet. But come on, it's 2021. If you are watching this video, you have access to the internet. There are absolutely no excuses here. When designing an RPG, one of the most important things, for me at least, is the world. If a game wants me to get immersed, then it better have some damn good places for me to visit and learn about. So let's look at the Kanto region and see how it holds up. Kanto's strength easily comes from its charm and world building details. Every town in the game is named after a color, said color corresponding to the type of the city's gym, with the exception of Viridian City and Saffron City, for some reason. The opening area, Palette Town, is fantastic. A palette by itself may just seem like a random assortment of colors, but these colors can be used and combined together to create just about anything. This is where we all begin, but the colors we pick are likely to be completely different. The players are the canvas, and their Pokemon are the colors. A trainer's Pokemon make who they are. They dictate your strengths, your weaknesses. Everything is about you and your Pokemon coming together. Now many of Kanto's areas are pretty comically small, with Palette Town only having 3 buildings and 2 seemingly homeless people, but that's where you kinda have to expand your suspension of disbelief. Of course Palette Town has much more than 3 buildings. Of course Celadon and Saffron City aren't just a few blocks away, but when viewed through the lenses of the weak, tiny Game Boy screen, it becomes much easier to imagine these locations as being far more than what they seem to be. Having a lot of buildings would also cause too much clutter. Everything in Kanto has a clear purpose, and it's very hard to get lost, even without a map. My favorite thing about Kanto would have to be the little details. Let's take a look at Saffron City. This area, unlike the game's other cities, contains 2 gym buildings which are both right next to each other, and for a while, the town actually had 2 gyms, a psychic type gym and a fighting type gym. Due to regulations, however, one of the gyms had to be demoted, so the 2 gyms were pitted against each other, with the winner getting to stay. And of course, the psychic type gym won, because psychic types are broken as all hell and are strong against fighting types. So now, what was once a fighting type gym is now just a measly training dojo. Everything I just told you is just gleaned from minor NPC dialogue, and I absolutely love stuff like this. Tiny little details that will go missed by most players, but still serve the role of enriching the world. But while Kanto prospers from such details, it also sadly suffers when it comes to variety. The various cities do offer quite a bit to set them apart, but the issue lies with Kanto's many routes. These are the main stretches of land you'll travel through to reach towns, and they are sadly some of my least favorite parts of the game. Kanto has 26 routes, and outside of the few water routes which are all basically just straight lines, almost all of the routes are visually identical. I like me some grassy landscapes, don't get me wrong, but pulling the same card over and over does get old after a while. Kanto is absolutely filled with these weird tube-shaped objects. I have no idea what these are supposed to be, but they're gonna block basically any path you might want to take. It just gives many of these places an incredibly artificial feeling, not a fan. But my biggest issue with these routes would have to be the near endless amount of trainer encounters. Okay, I'd like to put a few things on the table first. Pokemon has 2 types of encounters, wild Pokemon and trainer battles. Wild Pokemon are pretty weak and can be mostly run away from. Those are the Pokemon you can capture and add to your party. You find them by moving around on grass in order to get into a random encounter. Now, random encounters are the topic of much scrutiny. It is often debated over time and time again whether it's an outdated game mechanic that should die, or if it still has a place in today's climate. And as a person who never really minded random encounters much in the first place, I have to say that Pokémon has one of my favorite implementations of them in the entire genre. Most JRPGs around the 80s and 90s gave the possibility of a random encounter popping up with every step you take. And that rule applied to almost every area in those games, with the exceptions often being towns and hard locations. However, for most of Pokemon's areas, the only places where encounters are possible are grassy fields, which are often pretty easy to avoid, but then we have the issue of caves. When inside caves, every single step you take could lead into a random encounter, but while this may seem bad, the single greatest item in all of Pokemon is here to save the day, our lords and saviors, repels. When using a repel, you will never encounter any wild Pokemon that is below your lead Pokemon's maxed level. The repel will wear out after a set number of steps, and there are 3 types of repels. The more expensive the repel, the more steps it will let you take before running out. I absolutely adore repels. They are an incredibly useful item when it comes to mitigating tediousness, while also managing to avoid breaking the game. If you encounter a Pokemon in the wild that is equal or higher than your lead Pokemon's level, that more than likely means that you are pretty under-leveled, and that taking out these wild Pokemon would prove worthwhile. Honestly, every JRPG should have a repel-like item, they're perfect. The only issue with them is that they become available after the game's first cave dungeon, Mount Moon, meaning you'll have to go through it without said legendary repels, so get ready for a whole lot of Zubats, and also sometimes Clefairy. So I have virtually no issue with the wild Pokemon whatsoever. Where my problem more so rests is actually with Kanto's trainers. Throughout the game, you will encounter many trainers who will force you to do battle with them as soon as they see you. You aren't required to battle most of the trainers, so if you really want to, you can try and dodge most of them, which funnily enough gives Pokemon a bit of a stealth element. And I mean, this ain't no Metal Gear Solid I've ever seen, but it's pretty neat. However, when I play Pokemon games, I always make sure to go out and defeat every single trainer. That's just how I prefer to play the games. But sadly, I fear that this approach is far from ideal when it comes to these first games, as throughout the many routes, Pokemon trainers are absolutely spammed relentlessly. Just the way from Lavender Town to Fuchsia City has you fighting up to 37 fucking trainers. This absolute trainer spam is frankly just exhausting. Each of the trainers do have like 3 unique lines of dialogue, but the Pokemon selection is rather dull. 150 Pokemon might sound like a lot, but when the game says trainers just use about 50 of those 150, it just becomes tiring. However, this entire area between Lavender and Fuchsia is actually completely optional, believe it or not. Early on in the adventure, you can get the bike. The bike is awesome. It lets you move around about twice as fast as on foot. I am sadly not a big fan of how every time you ride it, it overwrites any area-specific song with this generic happy loop. It's a good song, but I would also like to go fast while being able to hear original music if possible. And what's even weirder is that in the game's final area, riding the bike doesn't change the music. So then why can't we just have the option to turn the bike theme off? The regular movement speed is honestly not that bad at all, as the world itself is pretty condensed, but after you get the bike, there is no going back. And you could even use it to access the exclusive cycling road, an alternative and much more enjoyable way to arrive at Fuchsia. Of course, I went through both of them because I'm a completionist, but it's still neat, methinks. The game does actually have quite a few instances of non-linearity, and while these are undeniably pretty cool, as they let each person's journey be even more unique than it would have been otherwise, this non-linearity also sadly comes at the cost of game balance. The level range becomes really wonky about halfway through. Your Pokemon get stronger, but the opponents stay at around level 30 for a long while. But as you reach the end game, the level curve suddenly spikes out of nowhere. Let's put it this way, the final boss's highest level Pokemon is level 65, but when I got to him, my highest level Pokemon was only level 48. And let me remind you that I battled literally every single trainer in the game, yet I was still under-leveled as hell. I luckily didn't have to grind to beat the Elite Four, as the AI in these games is so laughably bad it's just pathetic, but it is still a pretty bad look on the game's part. Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow's tone remain pretty consistent during most of their early game. You explore bright areas, fight some kids and take their money take a cruise ride and help out a CC captain, it's all fun, cartoony and whimsical. You will eventually reach Rock Tunnel, a dark dungeon that will take the average player a pretty sizable amount of time to get through. You'll probably feel very relieved after finally finishing it, but I doubt that relief would stay for much longer, once you realize that what awaits you on the other side is Lavender Town. Lavender Town is a complete and utter mood whiplash. All of the music and area so far have been so bright and happy, but Lavender Town isn't happy. It's haunting, creepy, almost melancholy in a way. The town's main point of interest is the Pokémon Tower, an entire Pokémon graveyard filled with people mourning the loss of their best friends. Talking to the NPCs reveals an even more horrifying tale. Before reaching Lavender Town, players will have no doubt encountered Team Rocket before. They're an organization said to have been using Pokémon for evil, but the game has yet to really portray them as a serious threat. They just seem like a bunch of clowns, but Lavender Town is where you learn the truth about Team Rocket. They don't just use Pokémon for evil, they straight up abuse and kill Pokémon for personal gain, as shown with a Cubone whose mother has been killed by Team Rocket, and now wears her skull as a mask. Jesus Christ. This is why Lavender Town is so effective. It's used as a tone whiplash to show you the dark sides of the Pokémon world, and does wonders in making the players despise Team Rocket. Now, is this part perfect? No. When you enter many of the town's buildings, the music completely changes, and is now happy again all of a sudden. They say that Cubone wears the skull of his dead mother, okay. But Cubone is a species, there are many Cubone out there, and every Cubone has a skull mask. Does this mean that literally every Cubone has a dead mother? These little holes don't completely ruin what the game is going for here, but they definitely damper it. However, I think Lavender Town's brilliance doesn't stop there, as after you're done with Lavender Town, you'll soon reach Kanto's grandest city-state, Celadon City. Celadon City is basically Kanto's capital. It has everything. A giant shopping district, a bunch of tall buildings you can't enter. You can even find Game Freak's office. Yes, Game Freak, the developers of the game, put themselves in as a cute little Easter egg. They talk about how they made the game, so they are basically the gods of this whole realm, and everybody is just cool with that. But one major location in Celadon City that is bound to catch your interest is the Rocket Game Corner. This immediately just raises a bunch of red flags. Team Rocket, Kanto's greatest evil syndicate, is just casually running a game corner in the middle of Kanto's grandest city-state. The most shocking thing is that literally everybody just seems completely cool with that. Yeah, there are a few detractors, but overall, people are just okay with Team Rocket chilling out in town. Many of them aren't even aware that it's run by Team Rocket, despite the fact that there is a sign proudly proclaiming that right in front of the damn place. How oblivious could you possibly be? The game corner is of course a gambling facility. You trade money for tokens, and you set tokens on slot machines. Having the place be ran by Team Rocket is a good way to let it be in the game, while also clearly highlighting it as a negative thing. The player is free to enjoy the game corner, but here's the catch. Team Rocket are selling actual Pokémon as the prizes. This might not have seemed like a big deal if the player came to Celadon before Lavender, but since we already know how cool Team Rocket is to Pokémon, the prospect of them just selling them out is absolutely terrifying. Having the game take you to Celadon City right after Lavender Town makes me think that this was intentional. Both areas are practically polar opposites. After the player gets exposed to the truth Lavender Town showed them, they won't be able to go to the happiest place in the world without being able to see some dirty sides. I honestly kinda wish the game went more into these themes, because as it is, most we get is subtext. I spent quite a while at the game corner, as the next party member I wanted was only available for 1000 tokens. The slots are not fun at all. It is a giant pain in the ass even getting 1000 tokens. There are a few tricks that help make the process go by a bit faster, but they don't help much. But what I ended up with was a brand new fire-type Pokémon to add to my team, Vulpix. One of the cutest Pokémon in all of Kanto, no doubt. In order to evolve Vulpix into Ninetales, I would need to use a Firestone, which can conveniently be purchased in Celadon City. However, I actually held up on evolving it for quite a bit. You see, once Vulpix evolves into Ninetales, it won't be able to learn any new moves to level up, which would highly damper it. So I instead chose to stick with Vulpix until it got to level 35, at which point it learned Flamethrower, an incredibly deadly fire-type attack, after which I immediately evolved the cute Vulpix into the majestic Ninetales and never looked back. This is another example of rewarding players for sticking with weaker Pokémon by making their strong Pokémon even stronger. I quite like it. I named my Ninetales Bothertails because its tails kinda look like they've been dipped in butter. Sadly, when I got my Vulpix, it was only level 18, while my two other Pokémon were level 35, meaning I had to grind it up for quite a bit in order to get it caught up with my party. And this is where I should probably mention a bit of a controversial emulation feature I used. Fast forwarding, or turbo. Basically, when all I was doing is just grinding, I mostly just fast forwarded through most of it so that I can get back to the game faster. I did use fast forward extremely sparingly during most of my playthrough, but I think it should still be noted. But anyways, back in Celadon City, you could also buy a Thunderstone which will evolve Pikachu into Raichu, giving it a healthy stat boost. However, in Pokémon Yellow, you can't evolve Pikachu into Raichu. Why? Because Pikachu doesn't want to evolve. This is yet another example of Pokémon Yellow suffering from its inherent need to stick so closely to the anime. In the anime, Ash's Pikachu didn't want to evolve into Raichu. Why? Because Pikachu is the mascot, and Raichu isn't. That's why. While this worked for the anime, when applied into the game's rule sets, it completely and utterly fails. From Celadon City onwards, the game expects your Pokémon to be much stronger than they were previously, meaning Pikachu greatly falls and will more than likely end up as your weakest party member. That's why I'm happy the game doesn't force you to use Pikachu, because he sucks. And speaking of sucking, back to Team Rocket. Despite all of the praise I just gave them, I sadly still have to say that I am not a fan of Team Rocket as antagonists. I think Team Rocket suffers from feeling less like a genuine threat, and more like an obstacle. Yeah, we get told that they do some messed up things, but all of the grunts are still absolute clowns, supporting some of the stupidest dialogue in the entire game. This is even more so strengthened by Yellow's inclusion of Jesse and James from the anime, who feel so incredibly slapped on I'm not sure why they even bothered. There is actually one Team Rocket grunt whose dialogue I actually liked, if I had started as a trainer at your age. These Team Rocket grunts all probably had pretty rough childhoods, and as such, never got to be young Pokémon trainers. They can't see Pokémon as anything more than just tools to be used for evil. It's almost kinda sad in a way. I say almost because this guy is just a speck in a field of crap like the 4 Rocket brothers. Oh, how evil. All of Team Rocket's issues culminate with their leader, Giovanni. Giovanni suffers from a lack of presence. He is barely ever acknowledged outside of your few encounters with him, and he's about as generically evil as it gets. The end of the Team Rocket arc is pretty weak all things considered. It's revealed that the final gym leader who was kept hidden was actually Giovanni all along. On the offset, this is a pretty cool plot twist. The final gym leader and the leader of a criminal organization you came up against are actually the same person? That's neat. But the final encounter with Giovanni is the textbook definition of an anticlimax. Giovanni just disbands Team Rocket because he lost to Red, despite the fact that he also lost to other trainers in the past. But then he just says he'll retire his evil ways and dedicate the rest of his life to Pokémon research. Wait, what? Giovanni just decides to quit being a crime leader and become a good guy only because he lost in a Pokémon battle. I would have gotten it if he lied to Red only to get him off their tail. But no, he actually disbands Team Rocket after this. This plot point, out of everything in the game, was always the one that made the least amount of sense to me. My final take on this is that I think Team Rocket works better as a combined entity, who represents the dark side of the Pokémon world, but when you look at the finer details, the image starts to blur, and Giovanni, the cornerstone of it, really should have been better. The main reason Team Rocket even exists is because Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow don't really have any sort of plot per se. It's just you going to defeat the gym leaders and becoming a cooler dude, fighting and catching a whole lot of Pokemon along the way. Instead of a story in a traditional sense, Pokemon's main writing appeal comes from its lore. Team Rocket are just there to be villains, and pretty flat ones at that. But where Pokemon's lore truly shines is with its Pokédex entries. Every single Pokemon has 2 entries, thanks to Yellow adding new ones. These are basically nature reports giving you a fun fact about the Pokemon. They tend to go into less than pleasant details. Pokemon outright hunt and kill each other in the wild. It's pretty gruesome. And speaking of gruesome, once the Pokemon Paras evolves into a Parasect, its mushroom takes over its body and it is left as little more than a shell. That's metal. The Pokédex entries help with making each Pokemon unique. But if we want to dig even deeper into the lore, we have to look at the Pokemon Mansion. The Pokemon Mansion is a broken down mess of a dungeon. The music is barely even coherent. It's just a random assortment of beeps and boops. You immediately get the sense that something has gone terribly wrong here. If you want to, you only have to come here to get the key item you need, and then immediately leave. But if you're curious as to what could have possibly happened in this horrid place, the game's got you covered. Throughout the mansion, you'll come across many diary entries, which will give you pieces of the overall picture. On July 15th, scientists have discovered a brand new Pokemon they named Mew, in Guyana, South America, out of all possible places. They began using Mew's DNA to try and clone it. And so, on February 6th, Mew's clone Mewtwo was born. But after over half a year of experiments, Mewtwo became too powerful and escaped the lab while wreaking havoc in the process. The writers of these diaries can be inferred to be Mr. Fuji, the keeper of the Pokémon Care Center all the way in Lavender Town. This could be assumed as the Pokémon lab located near the mansion cites Dr. Fuji as the lab's founder. After you finish the game, you can go back to Celadon City, where you can now enter a cave that was previously blocked off. Cerulean Cave is a difficult dungeon, containing the highest level wild Pokemon in the entire game, but once you reach its end, you'll come face to face with the one and only Mewtwo, the most powerful Pokemon in the game, who you may proceed to attempt to capture. This subplot is an absolutely incredible example of how to subtly tell a story. The entirety of it is only inferred from a few diary and Pokédex entries. The game never beats you over the head with it. You can get to Mewtwo not even knowing what he is, but the game rewards curious players with a great amount of lore and backstory. I will admit that Mewtwo's backstory is worded rather poorly and isn't all that mind-blowing, but it's the way the game goes about explaining it that I'm a very big fan of. Mewtwo's creation goes into the games as themes of humanity creating the worst of nature. Quite a few Kanto Pokemon seem mainly like products of human interference, and Mewtwo is the perfect example of this. The most powerful Pokemon was only created by humans trying to harvest too much power, but in the end, it backfired on them, and they had to deal with the consequences. That's why I think the game finds it so important to show us so many examples of Pokemon and humans living happily together. To reiterate that technology and nature can coexist, but we have to know our limits. Funnily enough, Final Fantasy VII, which only came out 1 year after Red and Green in Japan, covered a lot of very similar plot points and themes. I mean, Mewtwo may as well just be Sephiroth, but I'll spare you from a giant FF7 story rumble, for now at least. After being done with Mewtwo, you might be thinking, but what about Mew? Well, there is no official way to catch Mew in the game, but he was secretly programmed into it, and executing a glitch you can pull off rather easily early on in the game will have the players come face to face with the mythical Pokemon itself. He is a bit tricky to capture, but you should have him eventually. Mew is a bit of a taboo Pokemon. A lot of the game's early marketing kinda hid his existence. That's why so many early promos claimed that the games only had 150 Pokemon, as opposed to 151. And also why I kept altering throughout this video like a jerk. Mew's stats aren't as high as Mewtwo's, but it can learn every TM and HM in the game, so that has to account for something. TMs are items you'll find throughout your journey that will teach your Pokemon brand new moves. There are 50 different TMs in the game, and once you have used one up, it is gone for good. So you have to be careful choosing which Pokemon to use certain TM on. And then we have the 5 HM. These work a bit differently than TMs, as for one, HM never disappear, so you can teach an HM move to as many Pokemon as you want. HM moves can never be deleted however, which sucks. But hey, what can you do? Not delete them, that's for sure. The main draw of HM moves is the ability to use them outside of battle, at least if you have the correct badges. Pokemon can be very picky. 3 HMs are required to beat the game: Cut, Strength, and Surf. There are also Fly and Flash, but those more so serve utility purposes, with Fly being incredibly useful, as it lets you instantly travel to any city you want, and Flash being almost completely useless, as all it does is light up one dark cave in the entire game, and said cave could easily be traversed without Flash. I feel a bit mixed on HMs, as for one, I do actually like the idea. Having your Pokemon help you out outside of battle is super neat. But the main issue with HMs is that they permanently take out a Pokemon's move slot. Now moves like Surf, Strength and Fly are actually pretty solid attacks, but Cut and Flash are both next to worthless. And it sucks having to basically sacrifice a Pokemon's move slot just to cut down one little tree. But this is where HM slaves come in. An HM slave is basically a Pokemon whose sole purpose is just to hold on to HM moves for you to use. And with Mew being able to learn every TM and HM, I think you know where this is going. Yep, I taught my Mew Cut, Flash, Fly and Surf. What an absolutely killer moveset. While HM slaves do mitigate the issue, HMs are still far from perfect. Using HM moves outside of battle requires you to manually go into your Pokemon's menu and select the attack, which can be pretty repetitive in areas where you have to use them a lot. Looking at you, Victory Road. If you have a full team of 6 battle-ready Pokemon, it would also mean having to make many trips to the PC in order to switch one of your Pokemon out for an HM slave. The game gives you 12 boxes to hold in 20 Pokemon each, for a total of 240 Pokemon slots. The PC sucks. Not only is the UI extremely slow and clunky, not only do you have to save the game every time you switch a box, but if your currently selected box is full, you won't be able to catch any new Pokemon, which you'd likely learn the hard way. I have no idea why the game just can't switch out your box on its own once the selected one is full, but I sure as hell hate it. One of the most iconic things to come out of the Pokemon franchise is undoubtedly its music. So it may come as a surprise to many when I say I never really found the soundtracks of the original games all that amazing. It's mostly all good stuff, don't get me wrong, but there is honestly not a lot in Gen 1 that jumps out at me for being amazing. All of the Route and Town themes are good, but I found the dungeon music to be consistently pretty weak, with some tracks that can get pretty ear-grating. But I would be remiss to mention how many iconic songs originated here. The Pokemon Center theme, the gym theme, and of course, the classic as hell title theme. I also really appreciate the game for having 2 regular battle themes, one for wild encounters and another for trainer battles, even if both of the tracks aren't honestly all that amazing. The gym leader theme, however, is an absolute banger, and it really helps out with accentuating their importance. And the champion theme is by far the best song in the game, an absolutely epic climactic piece to accompany the finale. The soundtrack is all around good stuff, even if they did get pretty lazy with a bit of it. such as the Safari Zone theme, which is literally just a loop of the jingle that plays when a Pokémon is evolving. And on that note, I should probably talk about the Safari Zone, huh? Located at Fuchsia City's zoo, the Safari Zone is a bit of a side activity. You do have to go through it in order to get both Surf and Strength, but actually catching any Pokémon in it is completely optional. You are given 30 Safari Balls, and a limited amount of steps to walk before getting kicked out. You can't use any of your Pokémon. When a Pokémon is encountered, you can only either throw a Safari Ball at it, chuck a rock at it to make it easier to catch, but more likely to run away, and bait to make it less likely to run, but also less likely to be caught. While the Safari Zone is a fun change of pace for sure, it can also get brutally aggravating if you're trying to catch a specific Pokémon. And what do you know? Tauros, a Pokémon I want to use, is only available at the Safari Zone with a 10% encounter rate. Oh boy. Let's just say that it took me a long ass time to get this ball. God, how in the hell did Ash catch 30 of these bastards? I mean, I don't know. Not sure if I even watched that episode. It was banned because... yeah, let's just say that the first season of the anime is more problematic than most give it credit for. It actually took me so long to catch Tauros I somehow got a Chansey on a whim before finally getting my bull. And Chansey is by far the rarest and hardest Safari Zone Pokémon to catch. So at least you can tell where my lock's priorities are at. Tauros is a cool Pokémon. It doesn't evolve and is a pure normal type, but it has great stats, with its high speed being its specialty. And speed is a pretty important stat, as the higher your speed is, the more likely you are to deal critical hits, with Tauros having a 21.48% chance to get them. Critical hits not only dish out double damage, but they also ignore any status buffs and debuffs, meaning that if you buff your Pokemon's attack and debuff your opponent's defense, then it would actually be bad for you to get a critical hit, as it would ignore all of the status changes. Now a lot of people hate critical hits, as they are completely RNG oriented and can feel pretty cheap. But I actually like them. They add suspense to battles. Knowing that a critical hit can come at any moment and change the tides, it encourages careful and calculated play. They are definitely pretty wonky in Gen 1, but I still don't find too much of an issue with them. I named my Tauros Tartarus, after the tower from Persona 3, because they sounded kinda similar and I also kinda ran out of ideas by that point. It was level 21 when I caught him, while the rest of my team was in the mid-30s, meaning more turbo grinding for me, woohoo. But now, it is finally time for me to bring up what I personally think is the absolute worst thing about Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow. And that is of course, the inventory system. Yep, we're finally going there. The game only gives you 20 item slots. That might not sound extremely bad at first, but there are a lot of things that need to be taken into account here. You see, those 20 slots aren't just for usable items. Oh no! They're for TMs, HMs, key items, and usable items. Everything is put in one shared inventory. Now you might argue that this is a good thing, as it adds realism. Of course a single bug won't be able to hold on to hundreds of items, but to that I have two counter-arguments. 1. While realism does have a place in game design, you should also know when to forsake it in order to avoid tedium. And 2. That argument doesn't even make sense. If you have a usable item such as a Pokeball in your inventory, then it doesn't actually matter whether you have one of them or 99 of them. The game will still count it as one item, meaning that technically, you could hold up to 1980 usable items in your inventory. While that is definitely better than having every item duplicate count as a separate slot, it also makes me wonder why they didn't just give you unlimited inventory space at that point. The game throws a bunch of key items at you that you can't sell or toss away, meaning the only way to get rid of them is by depositing them in your PC. This means that literally almost any time you come back to a Pokemon Center, you'll need to mess around in the menus for a while, and just messing around in menus isn't fun. Especially with how slow and boring they are in this game. And it's not even over yet. Your PC, yes, your PC can also run out of inventory space. It only has 50 slots, meaning you have to constantly move items from and into the PC so that you can deposit or sell them. Holy fuck. The amount of time you spend in these games just messing around in menus is absolutely terrible. I have no idea how anyone thought this system was a good idea. By 1996, most JRPGs have already forsaken the idea of limited inventory space, and turned out better as a result. Gen 1's inventory system, in my opinion, is the most horribly dated thing about the games. Yes, more than everything else so far, the inventory just kills me, as well as everything and everyone I love and cherish. These games do have a whole bunch of key items, and a lot of them are admittedly pretty cool. I already mentioned the bicycle and how much I love that. But then there's also stuff like the fishing rods, which let you catch water-type Pokemon before getting surf. Additionally, some key items are also completely optional and are just there as rewards. For having 30 registered PokéDex entries, you can get the item finder, which can be used to find hidden items. Throughout Kanto, there are many items you can't even see, but if you were to press A on where they are, you would get them. While these are often telegraphed through NPC dialogue, a lot of them are still pretty cryptic, requiring you to check every single square in the game. And while you think that this is where the item finder would come in to save the day, it is sadly highly inefficient, requiring you to go into the menu every 2 seconds in order to detect items. So in short, if you want to find all of the hidden items, you're going to want to be using a walkthrough. For 50 registered Pokédex entries, you get the EXP All, which splits the EXP your lead Pokémon gets in two, gives the lead Pokémon half of it, and then takes the other half and splits it between your other Pokémon equally. While this is useful for grinding out big teams, it is also kinda painful at times, because you have to sit through the game telling you all of your party got EXP one Pokémon at a time, because one message telling you that everyone got EXP just wouldn't be enough, I guess. You're also going to need quite a few key items to get past some roadblocks, with the two most infamous ones being the Thirsty Guards and the Sleeping Snorlax. I know these really bother a lot of people, but I don't know. I actually think the Sleeping Snorlax are pretty cute, and the Thirsty Guards have a pretty fun solution. You just buy a drink from a vending machine and give it to them. It's as simple as that. My favorite key items in the games would probably be the fossils. Very early on, you are given the choice of taking either the Helix or Dome fossil, and of course, as a good believer in all that is good, I chose the Helix fossil like a child. And later on, you could also receive an old Amber by breaking into a museum. These items seem pointless for the longest time, but once you reach Cinnabar Island near the end of the game, you are given the ability to resurrect these Pokemon and add them to your team. The idea of resurrecting extinct Pokemon from fossils is just inherently really cool. There is no way around that. The Helix fossil becomes Omanite, the Dome fossil becomes Kabuto, and the old Amber becomes Aerodactyl, who I actually added to my team. All fossil Pokemon are rock types, and they all have pretty damn solid stats. While the Omanite and Kabuto lines are also part water type, Aerodactyl is actually a part flying type. Sadly, Aerodactyl was one of my weaker team members, mostly due to its lacking move pool, but it was still a lot better than Pikachu, that's for sure. I named my Aerodactyl Dead Air, because he's flying, and he was also dead for a while. Okay, maybe saying that my Pokemon nicknames were serviceable was not exactly accurate. One of the most important things when evaluating Pokemon games for many people are the game's new Pokemon. But how well does the original roster fare up nowadays? Well, I have quite a few opinions on some of these creatures. Pokemon designs, I feel, are inherently subjective by nature. Every single Pokemon out there is someone's favorite of all time. Every single one. So if I insult some of your favorite Pokemon, just make sure to remember that this is by far the most subjective part of my analysis. So let us delve into my personal tastes. Kanto Pokemon are great when they take many elements from real-life animals, yet still stay distinct enough to not be mistaken for them. Let's take a look at the Nidoran line. All 6 of these Pokemon are very animalistic in nature, yet they couldn't really be mistaken for any animals because of how many inherently unique traits they own. And as a result, they are some of the most solid designs this gen. Eevee is another great one. It's the only Gen 1 Pokemon who has more than one evolution, and all 3 of its evolutions support great designs. I especially like Vaporeon. It has both a mermaid tail and legs. Now that's badass. Sadly, many of the Pokémon fall into the trap of being too unremarkable. Show someone down the street designs such as Pidgey, Rattata, and Krabby. If seen without any context, most would take them as just cartoony drawings of a pigeon, a rat, and a crab. They are way too close to their source material to stand on their own, and as a result, turn out some of the weaker designs this gen. But on the bright side, there are also a lot of very strong original designs, such as the Gengar line, the Rapidash line, Chansey, Mew and Mewtwo, Arcanine, Scyther, and my favorite Gen 1 Pokémon, Dragonite. Dragonite, along with its pre-evolutions, are the only Dragon-type Pokémon in the game. Dragonite is also a pseudo-legendary Pokémon, meaning that while it isn't technically legendary, it does have stats that rival legendaries. Hearing that Dragonite is the strongest dragon of all, you might assume that he is a fearsome, angry beast. But no, Dragonite has one of the most lovable designs in Gen 1. Something about him just clicks with me. It is the perfect combination of fierce and cute. A textbook great Pokémon. He's basically the awesome version of Barney the dinosaur, and I can eat that stuff up. However, Kanto also has a Pokémon trend I really do not like at all, and that trend is Pokémon who are multiple sentient entities in one. Those include the Executor line, Weezing, Slowbro, Magneton, and Dugtrio. My issue with these is that it's just hard for me to get connected to a Pokémon if it's more than one creature, and kinda just a bunch of them who happen to come together. They're just way too off-putting for me, and not in a good way. The only one of these multi-Pokémon I like would have to be Kangaskhan, as it actually has a unique spin on the idea, and is overall very charming. But to wrap this up, there are also just a few Pokémon who strike the uncanny valley for me, and as a result I am not very comfortable with. Pokémon like the Machamp line, Mr. Mime, and what is undoubtedly the absolute worst Gen 1 Pokémon of all time, Jinx. I absolutely despise this Pokémon with every fiber of my being, and I don't think I even need to explain why. I believe its design, alongside its original design that was changed for obvious reasons, speaks for itself. Burn it! So overall, I unfortunately feel a bit mixed towards this lineup. While it has a bunch of really great designs, it also has a few really not that great at all designs. I still do like most Kanto Pokémon, but a lot of the ones I don't like, I really don't like. And since we're already speaking about things I have mixed feelings about, let's move on to Kanto's dungeons. Kanto has many cave-like areas, as I've said earlier, and the design of most of them is pretty decent. I have definitely seen far worse dungeon design than this, that's for sure. This is not even close to something like Final Fantasy II. Now there's a game I have strong opinions on. The final dungeon, Victory Road, is a pretty memorable one, mostly due to its tougher than usual trainers, and the absolutely epic name that is Victory Road. But we also have a few optional dungeons, most notably Seafoam Islands and the Abandoned Power Plant. These places have no trainers, and host two of Kanto's three legendary birds, Articuno and Zapdos. The third legendary bird, Moltres, can be found in Victory Road, which I always found odd. Why would this legendary firebird hang out in a cave with so many people? There is literally just a dude chilling right next to it. The legendary birds honestly never did that much for me. I'm not a particularly big fan of any of their designs, and I think they're just pretty okay where legendaries are concerned. Mew and Mewtwo are a whole lot cooler for sure. Legendaries are by far the hardest Pokémon to catch, at least outside of the Safari Zone. Not because they're particularly hard battles, but more so because you can randomly miss your Pokeball throws in these games, which is just frustrating. Once my Pokeballs actually hit the darn birds, I was actually able to catch all three of them on my first try, funnily enough. The game also gives you one Master Ball, a Pokeball that can capture any Pokemon without fail. I have always saved the Master Ball for Mewtwo when I played the Kanto games, so for this playthrough, I figured it would be fun to try and catch Mewtwo without the Master Ball, and he was tough for sure, one-shotting my party left and right while spamming Recover, which meant I had to damage him a lot. But I got him in due time, though I guess that does leave me with a spare Master Ball then, huh? Pidgey it is then, I named it Sparkles. The Team Rocket dungeons are probably my favorite ones. Silphco is an absolutely enormous building with 11 floors and a bunch of teleport pads everywhere. It is absolutely filled to the brim with Team Rocket grunts. And while this is definitely an offender of the trainer spam I talked about earlier, the dungeon itself is very satisfying to complete. It is so big that it even has a healing spot, and a guy who will give you a free Lapras, the final addition to my team, which I named Lapras, because, as I said, I ran out of ideas a while ago, so friends it is. Lapras is a bulky water ice type with an absolutely killer learn set. My Lapras had Surf, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, and Psychic. That's awesome, right? Well, here's the catch. By the time I got Lapras, my party members were all level 38. But the Lapras was only level 15. This meant I had to do a whole lot more grinding. In theory. But in reality, I had a backup plan ready for just this occasion. As I have no doubt established, these games are glitchy as all hell. Some of the glitches are pretty harmless, such as spamming my Pikachu with potions in order to max out his happiness. My love for you is artificial! But some are a bit more problematic, such as every attack having a 1 in 256 chance of missing, and some moves not even doing what they're supposed to do, such as Focus Energy, which is supposed to increase your critical hit rate, but instead decreases it. If Focus Energy was your favorite move as a kid, then I am so freaking sorry for you, dude. But one glitch stands tall above them all, and that would have to be the Missing No glitch. By talking to the old man in Viridian City, you could request him to show you how to catch a Pokémon. After seeing this, if you immediately fly to Cinnabar Island and continue surfing on its east shore, you will eventually encounter this horrid mess of a Pokémon called Missing No, or Missing Number. This might seem like a pointless thing to do, but this encounter will duplicate the 6th item in your inventory by 128. So the plan was to put a rare candy, an item that can increase a Pokemon's level on my number 6 item slot, and perform the glitch to get plenty of rare candies, which will get my Lapras caught up with the squad. But then I tried performing the glitch, and Missing No didn't show up. Okay, so apparently, Missing No is not in Pokemon Yellow. I mean, technically he is, but the stuff you have to do in order to make him show up is a lot more specific and tedious. So at that point I just gave up and leveled up my Lapras the normal way. You won this time, game. You won this time. But back to the dungeon talk. Kanto's 8 gyms all also kinda act as mini dungeons within themselves, usually having a higher focus on puzzles. Lieutenant Surge's gym is actual trash, both figuratively and literally. It requires you to guess which trash can has the correct switch, and then immediately hope the next trash can you pick will also have a switch. If it doesn't, the pattern resets and you have to check all of the cans again. Even if you know that the switches are always right next to each other, this is still pretty stupid. Why does Serge's gym even have so many trash cans in the first place? It isn't because he's American, is it? Sabrina's gym is another strange one, requiring you to take a bunch of teleport pads in the vain hope of reaching her. Can you really call this a puzzle when it's almost completely lock-based? Blaine's gym is probably my favorite one. Has a bunch of devices asking you Pokemon-related questions. If you get them right, you can move on. If you get them wrong, you have to battle a trainer. Of course, I purposely got every answer wrong because I wanted to fight every trainer, but that's neither here nor there. The gym leaders themselves all pose a tough challenge, especially in Yellow where they received a pretty substantial level boost, which I actually do like as it makes them stand out more. They are all pretty one-note and kinda just exist within their gyms, but I'm fine with that. Giovanni is still a disappointing final gym leader, but the rest of them are pretty solid, from the poison-type ninja Koga to the psychic Sabrina, who says she doesn't like fighting yet has a fucking whip. All good stuff, but with all 8 badges acquired, it is now time to move on into the endgame. Having all 8 of Kanto's badges will allow us to enter the Pokémon League. After going through its many gatekeepers, grueling final dungeon, and the infamous statue maze that's here for some reason, it is time for our final challenge, the Elite Four, Kanto's 4 strongest trainers. First off is Lorelei, a water/ice type trainer. She likes to inflict status effects on you, but Boogaloo was able to defeat her using its electric power. Next up was Bruno, the rock/fighting type trainer. Edward took care of this nerd without breaking a sweat. Then we approached the ghost/poison type trainer Agatha. who is probably the most interesting of the Elite Four members, as there are some hints that she was acquainted with Professor Oak in the past, yet Edward wrecked her all the same. And finally, there was the Dragon Tamer Lance, my personal favorite of this Elite Four. I don't know, I'm just a sucker for that stupid escape. Luckily for me, Lapras and Tartaros were able to slowly take down Lance's army of dragons, and also Gyarados and Aerodactyl for some reason down. And with that, we have defeated the Elite Four, and have been crowned as Pokémon champions, or at least, we would have been, if it wasn't for one little thing. Let's go all the way back. Back in Pallet Town, you aren't the only one to receive your first Pokémon. Blue was there too. If you are playing the red and blue versions, then Blue would purposely choose a Pokémon that has a type advantage over your pick, just to be a jerk to you. In Yellow, he outright steals an Eevee from you, which Professor Oak is just okay with him doing for some reason, leaving you with a stupid ass Pikachu who can't even evolve. He even goes on to evolve his Eevee into a form that is either more or less fit to battle your Pikachu, based on whether you beat him up or not. Blue is constantly portrayed as an asshole. He makes inappropriate jokes at the graveyard, he makes fun of French people on the SSN, and he even hangs out in Team Rocket bases for no reason. What a bot! The game always makes sure Blue is one step ahead of Red, letting you see that he defeated every single gym leader before you. And your fights against him are some of the toughest in the entire game. You just walk around, and then all of a sudden, even after you defeat him multiple times, he still acts like a jerk and pretends it just never happened. Smellia later he says, "What an iconically stupid catchphrase." And that is why the final reveal is effective as it is. The final boss and champion you have to defeat in order to enter the Hall of Fame is your rival, Blue himself. This final boss is excellent. Blue has a full team of 6 extremely powerful Pokémon, some of which I actually had on my team too, surprisingly enough. You get to see Blue's team slowly grow throughout your fights with him, which makes this final fight a great culmination of this arc. Unlike the Team Rocket arc, which was very poorly closed out, it was a very close battle, mostly due to my stubborn need not to use reviving items. But in the end, Tartaros pulled in by the skin of his teeth, and we successfully beat Blue once and for all. After Blue's defeat, Professor Oak comes in, disappointed with his grandson losing so quickly. Savage. He tells Blue that he lost because he didn't care for his Pokémon, and only wanted to be the very best, while his Pokémon were just a means for that goal. If he were to continue on like this, it could have become just as bad, if not worse than Giovanni, who outright abused and killed Pokémon for his goals. So friendship ended with Blue, now Red is my best friend, and we move on to the Hall of Fame. I love the Hall of Fame. It shows off you and all of your Pokémon in glorious fashion, alongside some truly victorious music, a great way to cap off the adventure. But there is still one task left for us to do, and that is to tackle the post-game. Red, Blue and Yellow even having a post-game is pretty commendable in and of itself. Most adventure games usually just put you back on your last save point if you try to load them up after finishing them, but Pokémon actually acknowledges your victory. You can re-battle the Elite Four, where the game will just act like it's your first time going up against them, but you still carry the money and the XP from the battles. However, the only thing that actually unlocks after finishing the game is Cerulean Cave, which I already went over, so our final task at hand is to complete the Kanto PokéDex. While I was very sparing with using Fast Forward during the main game, I absolutely abused it during the PokéDex completion process. It is a long, arduous task, requiring you to go around Kanto and catch every Pokémon in every area, getting everything you can't get using trades, and rematching the Elite Four dozens of times in order to evolve any Pokémon who need level ups. I also took care of all of the in-game trades just for funsies. Not really a point to them, just you trading requested Pokémon for other Pokémon with stupid nicknames. But I mean, you can trade a Cubone for a Machoke, who will evolve into Machamp through the trade. That's pretty cool. Too bad it stuck with the name Ricky for the rest of its life though. No offense to any full caps Rickies out there. The most frustrating Pokemon to get would have to be Porygon. It is only available for purchase at the Celadon Game Center, and in yellow, it costs 9,999 tokens. Jesus fuck. The amount of grinding it takes to get this stack is absolutely unreal. I had an easier time just using all of the money I earned from my Elite Four rematches and exchanging all of it for tokens. I was able to get Porygon after an hour of Turbo Elite Four grinding. Man, I don't even like Porygon. As I've said earlier, completing the Pokédex is a numbers game, and while it is pretty tedious, I do think it is also incredibly rewarding. The fast forward also made it a whole lot more fun. It was less like a chore and more like a fever rush. Just blazing through all of Kanto, throwing Pokeballs everywhere, and wrecking the Elite Four with Alakazam more times than I could count. And so, with the Pokédex complete, Professor Oak gives us a thumbs up, we get a diploma from Game Freak, which I can use to brag to my two friends that I 100% completed the 1996 game. I then went back and defeated the Elite Four one final time for good measure, and after going through the Hall of Fame for the last time, it was all over. And those were Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow. Coming back to these games 25 years after their release, their issues are more prone now than they've ever been. Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow are the products of a seemingly rushed development cycle, resulting in many glitches, balancing issues, mind-boggling game design decisions, and some confusing writing. For all intents and purposes, these are not very good video games on paper. They have been more than outdone by other JRPGs that came out after and before them. So then, this begs the question, why am I, and by extension, so many other people, still so drawn to these games? Looking back, while the original Pokémon games clearly lacked in polish and were pretty behind the times, they also have this extremely unique charm that I don't even think I can put into words. So many of Pokémon's rules didn't exist at this point. Real-life locations and animals are often mentioned. A lot of classic designs took a while to get settled on. The Kanto region, while a bit repetitive, has so many fun and memorable landmarks. And despite all of my issues, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a ton of fun revisiting these titles. The magic of Pokémon was born here. Boogaloo, Edward, Buttertails, Tartaros, Dead Air, and Lapras. They are more than just data on a .sav file. They're my party members who I went on a massive adventure with. I said it before and I'll say it again. That is what made these games, and the rest of the series, the absolute legend that it is today. Do you really think people would have cared for Pokémon if they were always forced to use the same 6 party members every playthrough? Of course they wouldn't. It is you and your Pokémon who make up this journey. The canvas and the palette, while bland and forgettable separately, come together to create a magical work of art. And the magic is just as strong here as it ever was. Even after 25 years, it's buried beneath a lot of poor design, but the treasure at the end of it is just as golden as ever. And for me, it was worth digging through all of that dirt, because the experience itself, at the time, was truly one of a kind. But with that, would I recommend Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow to someone looking to get into Pokémon? Hell no. These might be the actual worst starting points in the entire series. The later titles basically make these entirely obsolete, but I still respect them, and I think that as time will keep moving on, while the games will keep getting more and more dated, my respect for them will only get higher. If you are a massive Pokémon fan who has yet to play these games, then I would highly recommend you do check them out. Even if you already played through all of their remakes and are sick of Kanto by this point, I think the Gen 1 Pokémon games offer up a level of charm and humbleness both the remakes fail to capture. Make sure to prepare your patience, and you might want to use a Psychic type, but playing through the original games will give any longtime fan newfound respect for the entire series. It sure as hell did that for me during this playthrough. This is where I'd like to have a clever segue into the next mainline Pokémon games, Gold, Silver, and Crystal. But between generations 1 and 2, there are a lot of spin-off games I think deserve some more spotlight. Red and Blue are huge hits after all. It would be unwise of Game Freak and Nintendo not to capitalize on that. We'll be going by the original Japanese release dates, which means that next in line would have been Hey You Pikachu if I had any means of playing it. Yeah, Hey You Pikachu is sadly one of those games that can't really be emulated, as it uses features the N64 emulation scene has yet to crack. If it ever does become emulatable, I'll take a look at it ASAP. But for now, our next title in the lineup is going to be Pokémon Trading Card Game on the Game Boy Color. This is definitely going to be an interesting one for me to check out. But until next time, hope you all have it easy for a bit. See you all later. Bye. Thank you all so much for watching this long ass video. If you enjoyed it, which I greatly hope you did, please like and subscribe and share it around, it really helps the channel out. Comment down below saying what you thought of it, make a stupid joke, tell me how I could improve my content, that especially I would love to hear, and I guess I'll see you later. Peace.